Final hour Overdrive continues. Brought to you by FanDuel, bringing you everything from the opening line to the final score. Bryan Hayes, Dog, Jeff O'Neill, Jamie Noodles McLennan. Our best bets brought to you by FanDuel later in the hour. Our buddy Farhan live from Kansas City ahead of the game tonight. Later in the hour, Pierre LeBrun coming up here in a moment. We were talking about this Jani Hakanpaa situation. And I guess CJ was saying today, Chris Johnston on his podcast, that he's feeling more optimistic that Hakanpaa will in fact be in camp for the Leafs. So I don't know what that means in terms of his contractual status.
Refreshing my brain with why what happened to the guy?
So they again, my understanding was they signed him or they came to an agreement.
Yes.
And then it was never officially announced, and I believe it was Steve Simmons who reported. Simmons reported that what he had been told was that his knees were really in bad shape. Like he's had multiple knee surgeries, I guess, in the last couple of years. And Simmons had spoken with a couple of executives throughout the league. I believe I'm getting this right. It's 2 months ago. And there were multiple executives that were uncertain if he could play again, like that his knees were in bad shape. So that led me to believe, piecing those, piece of information together, that maybe he didn't pass the physical, maybe the Leafs got cold feet and decided we have to adjust the contract. We can't give you 2 years. We can't give you that kind of money. I don't know. I'm simply speculating that. I don't know. But July 1st, we were on here talking. We were on the panel. Say, hey, there's Jani Hakanpaa. He's a big guy that kills penalties. He's won a lot of games in Dallas. Come on down. There's your third pairing guy. You're playing with Oliver Ekman-Larsson or whatever. And now, again, there's some uncertainty there. Yet CJ said this morning that maybe he will be a part of camp. And if he is in camp and he's healthy and he can play, that's a big dude. That's a big guy that kills penalties. Yeah,
6'7", like a monster.
Yeah.
He is a guy that can be a difference maker, but like a third pairing guy, you can't push him too far up the lineup. But, it is concerning where, for me, I guess the red flag is if this guy has had multiple surgeries and that you have to be confident that this guy isn't going to be on IR all season, right? That's the biggest thing. Now, they didn't sign him for big bucks, but every dollar counts, right? That's the overarching thought process here.
And they need depth at that position.
They do.
Because I don't know who they have in the minors that they really have a lot of belief in that can step in. But over the course of the year, there's going to be 10 different players that play defense for you.
Yes.
There's going to be a litany of players that have to come up, sometimes have to stay in the lineup for a long time. Anything can happen. You can have one of your top 4 defensemen go down and be out for 3 months.
It's just kind of a crazy timeline to kind of some kind of agreement to, this has gone to hell, and now it's I'm optimistic about this. It's kind of bizarre.
It is bizarre.
It's a little bit like the Klingberg, where it's this guy's coming to camp, he's on a 1-year deal, and then his hips are a little, I don't know, and then all of a sudden he's just gone. Weird. It's weird stuff.
You'd think they'd want to avoid a scenario like that again. Because the Klingberg one, that blew up in their face. They were a believer that he would find his career and revitalize himself, and he was never an option for them. And when he did play early in the season, it was a disaster to the point where he shut it down. And, who knows what happens with him in the future. But
he'll have a hard time getting a PTO. He really will.
Klingberg?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think he's playing this year, is he?
I know, but when when he deems himself healthy, I think he'd have a tough time catching on somewhere. I think he'd have a tough time playing in the league, to be honest with you.
He'd have to come in on the cheap. It would have to be a PTO.
Yes.
It's like the Max Pacioretty situation. You have you have injury issues, you're older, you've been around for a while. You got to step into camp and prove you've still got it. But I saw a clip Charlie McAvoy was speaking a couple of days ago because, the Bruins were all skating.
Yeah.
And I thought of it with the Hakanpaa stuff, that Hakanpaa's a big guy. I don't think he's overly mean. I don't think he's 6'7", looking to fight and destroy people. But he's a big guy that blocks shots. He will lean on guys. I'm sure he clears the front of the net out pretty well. But size on defense, we've had this conversation so many times. And McAvoy said earlier this week that, and he's just stating a fact, that he's the smallest defenseman on the team because he's 6'1". Mason Lohrei, who looked great last year and into the playoffs.
Yeah, he's a nice player.
Really good young player. Lohrei's 6'5". They signed Zadorov. He's 6'6". Hampus Lindholm's 6'4". Brandon Carlo's 6'5". Andrew Peeke is 6'3".
Jesus.
The Bruins are monsters on defense.
Yeah.
That's what I think it's a brilliant play. I think it's a brilliant play because McAvoy's 6'1", but he can play. He's got skill. Like, he's got offensive ability. He's a PP1 guy. Lowry, I think, has some offensive ability. Lindholm's a really smart player. Like, it's size, but also smart. Like, you know, you can move. You can skate. Zadorov can skate a little bit. Like, he's not immobile. He's not a guy that you feel you can take advantage of necessarily just because he's big. It's probably the opposite. He uses his size, I think, to his advantage quite well. I'm a supporter in that game plan and that theory down in Boston. So you're up for that. That's another thing. We were talking about Cole Caulfield last hour. That top line, you're going up against guys that are 6'5" on average.
And
you got to climb
score.
those trees.
And you got to score. Exactly. All right, Farhan Lalji from Kansas City later in the hour. Here's our TSN hockey insider, Pierre LeBrun. How you doing, Pierre?
Oh, Farhan's at the opener, eh?
Yes.
How's it going, guys? Time
Good,
for
buddy.
Football tonight.
I love it. I love it. I know you're a big NFL guy. You jacked for tonight?
Yes. I got to remember, I'm in 3 different fantasy leagues, and I got to remember who all my players are, but I think I have Derrick Henry on one of my teams. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good to know. That does complicate things when you start having guys on every team in the league, basically. I hear you. I'm with you on that. But, yeah, we were just talking about this Jani Hakanpaa situation with Toronto where, like, we don't know, is he a Leaf? Is he going to be a Leaf? Do the Leafs want him to be a Leaf? Does he want to be a Leaf? Like, on July 1st, you guys were reporting that it sounded like he was signing with I think it was a 2-year deal, was it not, Pierre? Like, that was the belief. And now no one knows what's going on with this guy and if he's going to be in camp or if he's going to be playing in the NHL this year.
Yeah, and I wish I had information for you on that, but not knowing you were going to ask me about that. And this being
buddy.
my first, I have nothing new on that. I did make a call on Nick Robertson today.
Okay.
Ask you about that.
Let's start there then. What do you have? What's the latest on Nick Robertson?
Well, the latest there is that I'm told that he still would prefer a change of address, but that it's been slow going on that file. You know, he's got a pretty powerful agent in Pat Brisson, and but checking with a couple of different people involved today, he's training back home and waiting for a resolution, but the process certainly hasn't moved along as fast as I think as this camp would like. So we'll see where that goes.
What is he expecting, Pierre? What are the Leafs just going to say? You got to hang tight and you got to wait this out. How long is he going to report to camp? Like, how far is he willing to go?
Yeah, tough to say right now. And this time of year, dog, there's, in fact, if you look at a lot of the unsigned RFAs, there's still quite a chunk of them. Detroit has 2 major stars still, Lucas Raymond and Moritz Seider, working out together in Germany with Dallas Eakins. So that tells you maybe where that's at right now. But there's a number of guys, Cole Perfetti, Dawson Mercer, a lot of RFAs still unsigned. And it's because it's still early. I mean, the puck doesn't drop for real for another month. And, deadlines tend to spur on signings this month. But I always caution people that a lot of these go right down to the wire, and that includes the Nick Robertson situation. There's certainly no guarantee that he actually gets moved. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of leverage in this situation.
No, there's not a lot of leverage, but we were talking about it yesterday too, Pierre, here's a guy where the left side is not super cemented within the organization for the Leafs. I mean, you've got players that are ahead of him, but, it's not like they're, 20-year vets or 15-year vets. And Nyes is ahead of them. Bobby McCann is a guy who's or McMahon. God, why do I butcher it? I apologize. That's 2 days. Two days in a row. I'm disrespecting.
You're thinking of Jared McCann.
I know.
Bobby McMahon.
Bobby McMahon had a really good season last year. There's an injury, but these guys aren't 10-year vets. So to me, Nick Robertson, this is prime for him to try and get something done, and maybe an opportunity with a new coach and maybe a thinner left side to really make some noise this year. Like, is that on the table? Or is it just he wants a change of scenery and there's nothing that can be done between, the 2 camps?
Yeah. I don't know that nothing can be done. You mentioned, Noodle, something really important there. Coaching change, fresh start with Craig Berube. I think that's got to play a role here if he ends up signing. And, listen, we've seen in this offseason players elsewhere asking for a change of scenery and then ended up signing. Martin Necas is example number 1. Man, we wasted enough oxygen talking about his trade request going into the draft in the offseason a couple months ago, and he ends up signing a 2-year deal with Carolina to stay put because it just didn't materialize. I mean, when you're in RFA, there's only so much you can do. And so we'll see where this goes. But again, just checking in with Robertson's people yesterday, status quo as far as his top desire, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen.
With Pierre LeBrun, our TSN Hockey Insider, we were talking about the Bruins before you came on and the size of the defense.
I heard that.
And they just have monsters back there. The question is, who's playing in net opening night? Because one of those RFAs that you referenced would also apply to Jeremy Swayman, their stud goaltender, and he's the man now. Allmark's in Ottawa. Like, he knows, you talk about leverage, he's got some. Like Robertson doesn't, Swayman does. What is your understanding of what it's going to take for Swayman to, I guess, get into camp and be playing? Like, what kind of money are we looking at here? Because it's always tough to get a read on the goaltending market compared to some other positions.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I think this will get resolved. I know talks are ongoing, but the Bruins, you're a Bruins fan, probably you like this. The Bruins they hang tough in these negotiations, man. They don't give in easy.
Sometimes.
Right. And so, this has gone back and forth. He's coming off a deal where he made 3.5 and had a fantastic year. It really comes down to short or long, obviously, as far as it affects the AAV, but I don't see this one not getting done. As you said, Swayman's got all the leverage here. He's their guy. He's going to play a ton. And in fact, this is a huge year for him. I mean, I think he's in line to be a candidate to make the Team USA for 4 Nations. I mean, there's a lot on the line here for Jeremy Swayman, but there are a few of these that I could see going to the wire. I think he signs here at some point. I don't see why this needs to drag on.
Pierre, I saw a clip of Swayman where he was talking on a podcast, or I don't know where he was, but he said, I took the time to understand the business and where I stand and what it means, as opposed to just saying, my agent, get it done and let me know when you get it done. Do you think a lot of these guys are doing that now?
I don't think enough of them are. I'll be quite honest. I think that, and I guess in some ways it's what you love about hockey players, but I think a lot of guys just want their deal done. It weighs on them if the summer goes on and they're not signed, honestly. And I think teams know that, right? And I mean, you guys lived at O and Noodles. I mean, it's not a comfortable feeling when it's September and you're not signed. I mean, it's just by nature, you're creatures of routine and habit. And so that's why most guys do end up, I wouldn't say giving in, but certainly telling their agents take the best deal once camp rolls around. And veterans GMs know that. But there are the minority of players that are ready to dig in, and we've seen that over the years. And honestly, I encourage players to understand the CBA and do that more often. Protect your brand and fight what you're worth for.
Yeah, I agree. What about the PTO front? Not the mainstream. I thought I saw Tyson Barrie.
Tyson Barrie's an interesting one. I mean, boy, talk about a guy that, obviously used to be a power play mainstay, a top 4 guy. He's signing a PTO with the Flames, but I think there's a pretty good understanding that as long as camp goes the way it should and he's the player he should be, I think that ends up in a deal where, it'll be a bargain for the Flames with more than a league minimum. But I see him signing an NHL contract with the Flames through that process. And it makes sense for Calgary with all their changes on the back end to bring in a veteran like that, who at the end of the day could be a good trade chip for them if he has a bounce back year. So that's an interesting one. But, it tells you how quickly it can go when you're a regular and you have a couple of tough years and obviously wanted out of Nashville. I mean, the Predators, Barrie Trotz, they tried to move him. Not only, they tried to move him at the deadline and really couldn't find any takers. But I think there's some juice there left in Tyson Barrie, and I wouldn't be surprised if you see a bounce back year from him in Calgary.
Yeah, the PTO news is always interesting this time of year. We were talking about it earlier that Nikolai Kulemin has signed a PTO with the Ottawa Senators. That's caught a lot of Leaf fans off guard. He's been out of the league for 6 years. But, I guess, they're like, if you're a team, why not? I guess, give it a shot, bring guys in, and maybe it says something about farm systems with certain teams, too, or where they are in the process. They don't want to force kids into it, and you get a veteran on the cheap that, like you said, if you're not a great team and you're probably going to be a dealer at the trade deadline, that might actually be something that falls into your lap, and all of a sudden you get like a third-round pick or something basically for free.
The PTO conversation is a really tough one, because I know I've spoken with agents the last few years that felt that their clients probably should have taken one, and they didn't, and then, basically the career's over. And I think as a player, there are players that, there's a pride factor there. And they're like, PTO? Dude, I've been in the league 10 years. And there are players that just won't accept going down that route. And I get it. But at the end of the day, it's so competitive, and the league continues to get younger, and teams are more open than ever to have young players on their roster. I think if you're a guy in your mid to late 30s and things haven't gone your way, but you get offered a PTO, why not? I mean, at the end of the day, you're talking about a couple weeks of camp. You might as well remind people what you're made of and show your pride and see what's there. But there are some players, I'm telling you, you'd be surprised, by some of the names the last couple of years that were like, yeah, no PTO for me. Well, next thing you know, it's December, you're not playing.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, the market bears what the market bears. And if you didn't get signed this summer to a normal contract and all I have is a PTO and you're still hungry to play, then what else do you have?
Yeah, it can be tough, man. These are proud guys.
Too, they're like, really? You got nothing for me? It's a tough scene when the agent keeps calling. It's like, actually, nobody wants you. So,
well, you know what's funny though? We were just talking about John Klingberg. Did he not turn down a massive deal in Dallas?
Big time. Big time. Like, would have been the deal that took care of things for life, really.
Oh,
yeah.
And he ended up separating with that agent and moved on. But that was a massive mistake on the player's part, for sure. And, since then he's had injuries and so on. But, and really the Stars kind of saved from themselves on that one. That didn't materialize, because a year later he wasn't the same player. And, that's the double-edged sword of these things. Like, for every time that you find a player that should have held in and waited a year. Like, I always thought Brad Marchand, and I get it, again, the Bruins cap culture, but Brad Marchand signed a year before he needed to, at the peak of his career, right before the 2016 World Cup of Hockey, remember? And you knew about a month into that deal that he was worth a lot more money. Like, that was, but again, that was the culture in Boston, and he dug in on that, so good for him. But on the flip side, sometimes the timing is unbelievable. Nicholas Backstrom signed a massive extension with the Washington Capitals a month before the pandemic came at $9.2 million a year, a deal that didn't kick in until a year later, and has barely played ever since, unfortunately, because of the hip situation. His career is basically over. But there's the flip side of it. I mean, what was the rush really there to sign him? Probably. He was a legacy player. Him and Ovechkin, the face of the franchise, but unbelievable how bad the timing was for Washington at the end of the day on signing that deal a month before the world shut down at $9.2 million a year.
Crazy. Yep.
Yeah.
Crazy. All right, Pierre. Well, it's good to have you back, buddy. And what do you think with Dak playing into his final season? One quick Dak question. Gotta ask about Dak. Like, there's some rumors maybe they're going to work out an extension before the season starts. You see that coming or what?
I will tell you that after 3 straight 12-win seasons and, of course, face plant in the playoffs, I don't like the vibes this year. I think they're going to be a wildcard team at best. I think Dak has another great year, which, of course, he has every year in a way. He was second in MVP voting last year. It's not about he's going to get rich no matter what on his next deal. It comes down to whether he can see himself playing another uniform, and I don't think he can. I think that Jerry Jones has actually played this right. I don't like a lot of things Jerry Jones has done. I think he waited way too long to sign CeeDee Lamb. On this particular file, I think he's read the tea leaves right. I don't think Dak goes anywhere.
All right. There you go.
Pierre, do you think Jerry ever hands the keys over to someone else? He's getting to an age where don't you think he'd hand the keys over and say, you run the football team? Is that ever going to happen?
There's no question if you had all of us Cowboys fans on here at the same time, 99% of us would agree to that. On the flip side, his franchise, I think recently, did I read this right? The Cowboys are now worth more than any franchise of any sport on the earth.
Yep.
Thanks, I get it. I'm talking about running the football team.
I know. Listen.
He can do what he wants.
The two of the top three running backs played another era. I know what's going on with this team right now.
Scary, man. Well, best of luck to you, Pierre, and the Cowboys and your 3 fantasy teams.
All right. Well, I know your Packers look good, Hayes. And O-Dog, let me know what bandwagon you're on this year. Just send me a text.
That's a good question. We haven't determined
that. Go Bengals.
Go Bengals. Okay, go Bengals. Oh, okay. There you go. Go Bengals. Thank you, Pierre.
See you guys.
There's Pierre LeBrun joining us here on the Maple Toyota Hotline. Check out Maple Toyota's huge truck and SUV lineup, including Tundra, 4Runner, Highlander, and Grand Highlander, in stock and ready to deliver. Visit mapletoyota.com. Yeah, he's a big Cowboy booster, man. He's a true believer.
Yeah, but it's almost like he's setting himself. To me, that looked like he didn't want to say that. He didn't want to say, he wanted to say they're going to win it all this year. But he's like, I'm not
smart.
Sure.
He
didn't want to radio himself.
That's a smart play. I know that feeling. When you're a fan of a team that perpetually falls short, always brace for that. And then if it goes the other way, you can say, hey, this is the greatest.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
Pleasantly surprised.
Pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
Exactly. But, that John Klingberg contract, how many of those, that's worthy of writing a book about. How many guys turned down deals and then never got the money back?
I'd read that book because someone would have the scoop on deals that were where a guy thought he was way better than something and they walked away with nothing.
The only other one I can remember, and he played in the league a few more times, the right shot defenseman, played here in Toronto.
Cody Franson.
Yep. He ended up going, I think he went to Buffalo. He might have ended up Anaheim.
He got like a $4 million deal on a 1 year or something.
And weren't the Leafs offering like 4 years at $4 million
like $20 million or something, I thought.
It was, it might have been 6 years or something. Like it might have
big
been
contract.
Something like that. And, that's, I don't know where the fault lies. But like the Klingberg one, if by all accounts, like Dallas was offering 8 times 8 or something, 8 times 7, like what? How much more do you? I get it. Never been in that position, but like that's a huge.
Once they get to that, like it's just like buying a house. It's like once you get to that big chunk, you make it work. If they get anywhere near 8 times 7, you're like, sign the deal. Let's move on.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I don't know. That's a big miss, and you're right. Like the agent gets fired in that, but in hindsight, you're looking back. This guy left $50 million on the table. $50 million or more.
Exactly. And you fire the agent, like you said, okay, you're not getting the money back now. Like, obviously, fine, fire the agent. But it's also, like what Pierre said about what Swayman's doing, it's your career.
Yeah.
Like if you're sold a bill of goods that should not have happened that way, then sure, the agent's got to take some of that responsibility. But generally the way agents work is, I'm going to try to get you the most I can. I think there's this out here. I'm going to feed you this information.
But you also have to know the pressure points where they can walk away and say, we don't want you, period.
Yes, exactly.
My agent is always very in tune with that, where it's like there's this, and then there's also the idea of no thanks, period. You have to know the pressure points.
Tipping point for everyone in every situation.
Yes.
Every situation where you say, this is what's got to happen. Take it or leave it. You got to figure it out.
Yeah, I'm sure that happened with Stammer in Tampa, where there got to be a pressure point. Even with Steven Stamkos, the captain of the Lightning, with all the success they had, there was a pressure points there where Tampa said if he wants to get to this, whether it be a date, a number, whatever it was, they were willing to walk. And they got to it, and they walked.
Crazy.
Crazy stuff that he's a Nashville Predator.
Nashville Predator, Steven Stamkos. All right, Farhan Lalji coming up from Kansas City later in the hour. We'll get into our best bets brought to you by FanDuel as well. The Jays are off tonight, back in action down in Atlanta tomorrow. Overdrive continues, TSN 1050 and on TSN 2. All right, best bets brought to you by FanDuel coming up. We'll head to Kansas City ahead of the game tonight. Third year in a row, opening night in Kansas City. Just a staple. Like, you go to Kansas City and Andy Reid's there and Patrick Mahomes and Travis
They deserve
Kelce.
it, man.
They're the best. They're the best team. And to beat them, it's not going to be easy. And I think we all expect they're in the dance again. They'll be in the playoffs. And unless something catastrophic happens, injury-wise or whatever, that division is not very good. I don't think Denver's good. I don't think Vegas is good. I think the Chargers, it's going to take them a while for Harbaugh to figure out.
I know you gave some props to the Chargers for bringing in Harbaugh, and he could maybe make something out of the quarterback. It will take you exactly 2 weeks to start absolutely destroying them and hating them. Because they just do this. It seems like they've been doing the same thing every year. They've got this gunslinger back there who's got this incredible arm, but they just lose games.
They have self-inflicted wounds all the time.
Yes.
Like, I know I have buddies who are Chargers fans that watch them religiously, and it's an eerie feeling where you can see it. They're going to screw it up. They're going to screw up. Bad timeout, muff punt. Something
Bad
always
timeout.
happens where you're like, that cost them. That directly cost them, and they find a way all the time to get in their own way and lose.
What's your ticker on a firing in the NFL? It's so crazy how everyone loves what they have right now. How long does it take for someone to get gassed?
Generally takes a while in the NFL because it's a place setter, right? Like, it's got to get so ugly where someone goes in like Jeff Saturday and it's like you play it the rest of the year, but nothing's expected.
Yeah, but you could have a coordinator if an offense stinks.
That'll
like
happen.
They get gassed rather quickly.
By the end of October, someone will undoubtedly be fired.
Yeah.
Like, generally you got to give the guy 3 or 4 weeks, but that's usually what happens is the coordinator gets fired.
Well, you remember, like, Drager going into the NHL season always had, like, the hot seat, and he hated it because,
Well, imagine starting a season naming the top 5 guys you
like
thought were going to get gassed. Who you have to communicate with on a daily basis.
Do you remember that? I remember talking to Drager. It's like, I hate that.
Oh,
well, I'm like,
awful.
well, you're the one who had to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was the hot seat. Like, you haven't even dropped the puck yet.
Why don't we do Noodles? Why don't you do one? You do your first list next week, the hot list. The Hazy B list, the hot seat. Who's on the hot seat?
That guy will do it. The guy in the host chair. He will do it. Hayes, that's going to be one of your lists.
Don't give them any ideas. They'll have me up there for that. That'll be my only cameo in the regular season, preview show is me with the hot seat. Top 5. They'll slide me in for that. Someone's got to name who's getting fired this year.
I'm telling you, Mike Lane just made a note now.
Like, we'll fit you in. We'll fit you in.
The hot seat.
The Hayes' hot seat.
Do it this Thursday. Do it next Thursday.
I don't want to name off who's good. I can give you a couple names.
I'll do it. I'll do it.
Off the top of your head, who's on the hot seat right now?
Oh, man. This is going to sound crazy. It probably should sound crazy, but is Marty St. Louis a guy that's got to move them in the right direction?
Oh, my God. He is not
Don't
even
you
close
say
to
that.
All right, I'm not saying Marty St. Louis. I'm looking at the bottom of the standings. I mean, here's one. Here's one that's legitimate, and the reason why I'm comfortable saying this is because he's an unbelievable coach that's had great success. He's got like an ironclad contract. But Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh, like, they got to get in, right? Isn't there a lot of pressure? Like, you got to get in. You got to push that team's buttons. You got to make it work there, or else Sid's going to maybe leave or whatever. Like that, the amount of pressure that I would think that would be in Pittsburgh. I just feel like he's got such a great setup with the ownership there. He was involved in the hiring process of Kyle Dubas. I don't know. I don't have answers. The other reason I said Marty was because I was looking at the other teams that are at the bottom of the list, and they all have new coaches.
Yeah, new coaches have turned over.
All the new coaches are immediately on the hot seat. Like, you look at New Jersey, like, you got to make something happen there. Sheldon Keefe, they got a goaltender. Mm-hmm. You just mentioned the odds. Like, they gotta be good.
Yes.
Everybody that's got a new position with a goaltender, even Ottawa Greeny, like, they just can't. It can't be another wasted year. Everyone's got to be good.
But those coaches aren't going to get, like, turfed by
3
Christmas.
months in.
You know what I mean? That's what I said. Craig Berube, Travis Green, Sheldon Keefe, all of them, there's expectations within their own market, different expectations from ownership, but they're all not getting 3 months in a short leash.
Correct.
there, if it doesn't work, there's internal changes first before those coaches.
Right. Exactly.
That's the way I would see it.
And that's what I'm saying there. I'm not. I think Marty Samuel's done a pretty good job. And, their expectations, though, as it moves on and on, the longer you've been there, it's like, okay, you got to take that next step. And that's what I'm talking about in terms of the evaluation.
Yeah.
Greg Cronin down. I don't want to keep naming guys.
No,
I got to stop naming guys.
We're not doing it.
We're not doing it.
I know, but I'm just saying that was a Drager clip. That was Drager would have like a list of like who's on the hot seat. And that's tough to do when you're an insider or you're in the rink all the time because people see these lists. He's going to walk in there and, I'm on the hot seat. Eh?
Yeah, you have been number 3, huh?
Yeah, it's
pretty
tough.
hot.
Those are tough lists, man. Tough lists.
The hot seat for who's getting fired. It is a great bit, though.
It is.
I mean, you got to give credit where credit's due. It is a content-making machine.
It is. We got to do it. We got to do it.
You guys know who invented. I'm sure it was the Quizmaster.
Yes, of course.
That was his.
He knows
thing.
content, man. He knows what's going to get people clicking.
Yeah.
And what like you're flipping around. You get on that. Dregs is standing there, hot seat. You're like, I got to hear what this guy's got to say.
Yeah, I want to see if my team's coach is going to get gassed out of mine.
I know. It's so hard. Yeah, that's
it's harsh,
tough.
but hey, that's the real world, man.
Yeah.
All right, Farhan's coming up, and our best bets brought to you by FanDuel still to come. Chiefs Ravens opening night on TSN. Overdrive continues here on TSN 1050. All right, go time tonight. We love it. The NFL is back on TSN. It is going to be a huge game down in Kansas City. It's the third year in a row. We're starting things off in Kansas City. Kansas City Ravens tonight. I don't think it gets much better than that. Two really good teams, two teams that truly aspire to be in the Super Bowl again. And the spread's -3, Chiefs by 3 on FanDuel. The total's 46.5. You bet the unders early in the year. Generally, that pays a lot of money if you have that ability to be patient and be bold. We'll get to our picks a little bit later this segment, but let's head down to KC. The man is on the field. He's on the field right now for opening night. Here's our good friend, Farhan Lalji. What's the vibes like down there, Farhan? You've been down there every year, I believe, the last couple. What's it like tonight?
Yeah, just they've replaced blue from Detroit with purple from Baltimore, but a lot of excitement, right? I mean, because primarily the matchup, right? Last year, Detroit was this up-and-coming team. We expected things from them, and certainly they pulled off what was considered an upset at that point. But Baltimore, we know who they are. We know how good they are. We know Lamar Jackson's the MVP, and truthfully, with all due respect to fans of the Bills and the Dolphins and the Bengals, this is the biggest threat to knocking off Kansas City and getting to the Super Bowl. So I think it's going to be fascinating with Derrick Henry added for Baltimore, a better receiving core for Kansas City. Should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's huge. And both these quarterbacks have 2 MVPs. And I was asked about that earlier in the week. I'm curious your take on this. The likelihood that Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, I think it's a lock. Mahomes will get to at least 3, if not 4 or 5. Where do you see Lamar Jackson's career going from here? He's still relatively young. He's got 2 MVPs. Do you think it's reasonable to suggest he could chase multiple MVPs over the next 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And I'm curious to see how Baltimore plans to use him with the arrival of Derrick Henry, right? Because, when you look at his rushing totals, he's had 5,200 rushing yards in his career so far. That's 4th all-time amongst NFL quarterbacks. And it's kind of been a 60-40 split in terms of designed runs versus quarterback scrambles, right? And there's been some talk here about maybe a few less designed runs for Lamar, especially with a guy like Derrick Henry behind him. And he's going to run organically and get some of that because they want longevity. So, to your point, last year he made it through relatively healthy, and that afforded him a chance to get the MVP. But before that, he's had a tough time staying healthy. When this guy can play 17 games, he's absolutely going to be in that conversation because there's not another player like him. So I think he can win more MVPs. But, at this stage, after you've won 2 and you've got the big contract, that really is all about the Super Bowl now. So can he and this team take that next step? Because, there'll be a lot of questions after the AFC Championship game last year where neither looked good.
Talk about the next step. Do you have any doubt in your mind, Farhan, that at the end of this is the beginning of it all? We break down all the teams, and you do it with Naylor and Hayes, and we talk about everyone. But do you think at the finish line it's going to be KC right there again?
Yeah, I do. I do. And whether or not it's San Francisco or Detroit on the other side, barring injury or something unforeseen, I think the fact that Kansas City could win the Super Bowl last year with that receiving core and they're exponentially better now. Hollywood Brown won't play tonight, but when he gets healthy, and certainly Xavier Worthy, they are a better receiving core. Now defensively, they've lost a couple pieces, but the core of that defense is still there, especially with a guy like Chris Jones in the middle of that. So, yeah, when I look at the roster, I think this is the most complete team, and barring injuries, they should get back there again.
Farhan, is there any surprise teams that we should be, focusing on? Do the Bills come to mind, with Joe Burrow being healthy? Like, is there any teams that we should keep our eye on that you think might make some noise this year?
Yeah, I'm impressed with how the Bengals have been able to keep the bulk of their critical pieces intact after paying Joe Burrow. Right? I thought that was going to be a bigger problem for them than it was. They've lost a couple, but by and large, they've kept the majority of them. Right? So, but I just don't know that you can call them a surprise team. The AFC is so loaded right now. The teams that I mentioned earlier with the Bengals and the Bills and the Dolphins. And then, let's see what Justin Herbert does with Jim Harbaugh as the coach with the Chargers. But, when I look around, I got to be honest, and you're probably going to roll your eyes at me. I think Arizona, they've got a favorable schedule. Number one, if Kyler Murray can stay healthy, they've added some key pieces around him. That division outside of San Francisco, I think there's some question marks there in Seattle and with the Rams. So I think they could put themselves in position. They're not going to be a contender, but I'm just talking about a surprise team that could get into the playoffs after a couple of really down years. I think Arizona could be that team. Houston did it last year. I don't think we're worried about Houston. I think we believe they're ascending. The team that I've got my eye on the closest, and I don't know that I'm going to call them a surprise to get in or not, I'm really, really intrigued to see what happens with Philadelphia, because they took that step back last year. In the midway point of the year, everything changed. Can they get it back while they still have some elite pass rushers and some key players? I want to see where they go. Like, are they going to fall off a cliff, or are they going to fight and get themselves back into the conversation?
Yeah, they got that start tomorrow night, too, in Brazil. Green Bay against Philly. And you're right, the way they started last year, coming off the Super Bowl the year before, they are really complicated to figure out, Philadelphia. They're really, really complicated. Yet those offensive weapons, they are loaded. They are loaded, and they bring in Saquon Barkley on top of that. I mean, there's a chance that Philly team, if they can figure out what's going to happen with the offensive line, Jason Kelce no longer there anymore. Nick Sirianni's probably coaching for his job, though, is he not? I mean, they've changed the coordinators. It got so ugly last season. Are you a believer that Sirianni can right the ship there? And if so, are we talking Super Bowl contention possibly if they do?
Look, I'm not necessarily convinced a lot about Sirianni, but I am convinced that Jalen Hurts is legit. Mm-hmm. This guy is a very, very good quarterback, and I believe in his ability. You talk about the addition of Saquon Barkley. I think it's going to have to be a bit more of an offensive-driven team. You lose Kelce, but at center, and you mentioned, right? I mean, can they get the offensive line figured out? But their D-line, that pass rush isn't going to be as deep. You lose Reddick. There's other things going on there defensively. So it really is going to fall on Jalen Hurts. And when you look at how, they made the coaching changes that you talked about and what happened in season, there was so much drama in the season around that team. That affects your culture. So the first month of this season is going to be critical for them. If they go 3-1, they have an ability to kind of run it back and get there mentally. But if all of a sudden they're 2-2 or 1-3, I think they're going to fall off a cliff, and we're going to be talking about what they're going to do with a high draft pick next year.
Farhan, two quarterbacks, and I want to know who you're more fascinated to watch this season. One's Aaron Rodgers, and the other one is Tom Brady calling games. Who are you more fascinated to watch?
Well, that's a good question. That's a great question, to be honest. I think I'm going to say Aaron Rodgers, right? Because so much was expected last year. And Brian, you just talked about Nick Sirianni coaching for his job. I think the same thing's happening there with the Jets, right? I'm going to be at that game on Sunday. And I just have a lot of questions in terms of what Rodgers is going to have around him, right? Like, you've got Garrett Wilson. Breece Hall's a good running back, but he hasn't necessarily established himself as a top-tier running back. I question the weapons that he's got. I kind of think that he's in a bit of a position to fail, right? I don't know that the Jets are going to get into the playoffs. I know the Patriots are bad, but there's two other really good teams in that division. So I have a tough time believing the Jets are going to find a way in what could be Aaron Rodgers last year. The Tom Brady question is fascinating, though, because not necessarily that I want to hear what he's going to say as the GOAT, but the guy's a part owner of a team, which means there's a number of teams that are going to restrict his access, right? They're not going to necessarily have the warm and fuzzy off-the-record interviews and things like that.
That's
that
weird.
can affect him in the other role, right? So that's kind of bizarre. So if he's got limited access, does it become more about Brady's opinion? Does he try to be Nostradamus like Tony Romo was early in his career? Greg Olsen was pretty good last year, so he's going to have the comparisons all the time. So that'll be a lot of fun to watch. But in terms of on-field intrigue, I'm all about watching Aaron Rodgers. Can't wait for Monday.
Where does it stand? How would you apply that intrigue to Taylor Swift and tracking her for a second straight season?
Well, let's see. She went to 13 games last year. What did they win? 10 of them? They were at their best when Taylor was in the house. So here's what happens earlier today. I have a 12-year-old daughter, and I texted her and I said, "Hey, just so you know, Taylor's here." And she thought I meant that Taylor was with me when I was about to go on TV. So she begged me to say hello for her and try to get a video call for her and my daughter and Taylor Swift. And I don't know that I'm going to be able to pull that off, guys.
Do your best, Farhan. You're credentialed, right? You have a right to be there, too. You can walk through the suites. I'm sure you can find a way to track down Taylor Swift. And
I can call Zach Caleros because he's buddies with the Kelseys, right? So
right.
maybe that could be my in, but I don't know that I'd get past her security detail.
Do your best, man. I think you got a full season of it. So it starts tonight. Enjoy it. We'll catch you on SportsCenter throughout the evening. And we had a blast. We appreciate you doing this. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Farhan Lalji, live from Kansas City on the field, where Taylor Swift will be in attendance tonight.
She's going to be shown how many? You said not at the post game, though, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's no post-game coverage.
I guess
the game ends, it goes off the air.
But it's basically like the buzzer goes.
The celebratory hugs.
The celebratory, big win, or it was a loss and shaking her head. That's what I'm saying.
That's dependent on a couple things. Like if it's a blowout loss, they're not going to T Swift. If it's like a Mahomes to Kelsey touchdown for the win,
the lock.
Automatic.
That's the lock of the century. Like if Kelsey does anything significant, she's on.
Yes.
That's just the way it goes. And they'll have the walk in, maybe the walk out. There'll be a lot of Taylor Swift tonight and throughout the season. All right, our best bets. Powered by FanDuel. Make your picks and assemble a same-game parlay in seconds on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Rashee Rice, there was concern he might be suspended at times this year. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. That likely gets pushed into 2025. He's going into year 2. In the second half, he was lights out last year. No Hollywood Brown tonight. I think Rashee Rice has a big night. Anytime touchdown, over 5.5 receptions. I think he is lights out tonight. I think Mahomes finds him and finds him often. And I like Isaiah Likely over 1.5 receptions tonight. When Mark Andrews got hurt last year, Likely showed up big time. If Andrews wasn't there, that guy's a number 1 tight end, I think, in 15 teams in the league, maybe 20. But he is going to play a lot tonight. He'll have a lot of possessions on the field, Isaiah Likely, with Mark Andrews, without Mark Andrews, and I think Lamar will find him. So there's your any game parlay tonight, paying plus 435 on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. FanDuel Sportsbook app is the exclusive home of the Overdrive same game parlay. Please play responsibly. 19 plus, physically located in Ontario. All right, well, if you got anything to proclaim on the NFL season, now's your time. You got anything crazy you want to say? You want to talk about a team that's going to miss the playoffs, make the playoffs? That's interesting what he said about Arizona, getting a little bit of buzz. That means Kyler Murray's got to stay healthy. But
that's one of those
Aaron
ones
Rodgers.
where I'm
Aaron Rodgers.
I gotta see Arizona to believe it, man. That's been a sideshow.
I know. I'm not sure I'm buying that either. I think you
ever
got that
since Cliffy Queensberry was there.
Yeah. Well, and their new coach is, he came in from Philly. It wasn't a good year last year. They got that Marvin Harrison Jr., but they're in a tough division. Niners, Rams. I think Seattle's pretty good. If they get to the playoffs, they earned it. I'll say that. If Arizona finds a way to put it together, they certainly earned it. And that's the beauty of the NFL. Every year there's turnover. Every single year there's 5 or 6 teams you didn't see coming that end up punching a ticket.
Dude, that was one of the more goofy things I've seen in sports. When Kyler Murray signed the contract and then the organization started soiling themselves that he was playing video games too much. And I just never thought that I would see that. Dude.
It was a clause in the contract.
No kidding.
That's actually embarrassing. I'm sorry.
For him, that's embarrassing.
Yes, that's
what I mean. For a grown
mean.
man to be like, I have a video game problem and I can't.
Yeah.
I'm not watching game tape.
It is.
That's really, really embarrassing.
One of the craziest things I can remember talking about on this show.
That was a crazy one. All right, boys. Well, the pick is in. Owen Wilson on the clock tonight. You guys have taken Kansas City. You're laying the points, three points on the FanDuel Sportsbook app. Good luck to you guys. Al's brother and I will return tomorrow with our pick, Packers-Eagles tomorrow night. Good stuff, everyone behind the scenes. Thanks for tuning in today. We appreciate it. TV, radio, podcast, web. We're out of here. Enjoy your evenings. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back tomorrow at...
See you on the group chat. 4 p.m.
We'll chat then.